Hey, welcome everybody to another Thursday night shir. As you can tell from the background, I am not in shul tonight, and we are actually away in New Jersey for Shabbos. But we never want to cancel a shir, so here we are. And we may have some kids running through the background, but hopefully you'll bear with us so we can have an exciting shir. Tonight is the fifth night of Hanukkah, so we're going to say something about Hanukkah itself and learn something about Hanukkah connected to a previous parsha, really, but all within learning more and understanding our connection to the Torah, to Hashem, and to Judaism. So in this week's we're going to go back to a previous parsha with the story of Dinah. We'll go through the details of that story momentarily. But first, I want to share with you a very interesting Kedushas Levi. The Kedushas Levi is the Maggid of Mezrich, and he wrote a beautiful, beautiful sefer, which gives lots of different and very unique insights into all areas of the Torah. And one of the things he writes is that Hanukkah, the secret of Hanukkah, is really hidden in the Torah, in the story of Dinah. Now, first thing we have to realize is that the story of Dinah obviously took place in the Torah, and the holiday of Hanukkah is not mentioned in the Torah, because the holiday of Hanukkah was instituted at a later point in history and is not a biblical holiday. It's a rabbinic holiday. It's a beautiful holiday, and it's an amazing holiday nonetheless, but it's still only a rabbinic one. It's not biblical. So obviously, there has to be something that the Kedushas Levi is telling us as far as the connection between the holiday of Hanukkah and the story of Dinah. So let's take a look. We're going to look inside. I'll share the screen so we can see the story, the psukim of the story of Dinah together. And we'll see whatever comparisons we can make to get a little insight, and then hopefully we'll see a little bit more to what the Kedushas Levi is trying to teach us. So we know Vateitzei Dinah bas Leah, Dinah, the daughter of Leah, went out. Asher Yalda Yaakov liros b'bnos haaretz. She went to go see the people of the women of the land. She wanted to make some friends. She's a good teenage girl, and she wants to go out and meet some friends. Vayaros Shechem ben Chamar Hachivi. Shechem, the son of Chamar Hachivi, saw her. Nesihar, he was the chief of the land. He forced himself upon her, and he lived with her. Now, what happened was, this wasn't a one-time thing, and he actually loved her and wanted to marry her. And he convinced Dinah to stay with her. So Shem tells his father, saying, I want to marry her. Let her become my wife. He sees what happened, that his daughter was defiled. His children were not, the boys were not there. They were out in the field. So Yaakov was quiet until they came. Shechem comes to Yaakov in order to talk to him. Finally, the boys come back. And when they heard what happened, they were very distressed and they were very angry. And they said, this is not the type of thing. We don't do these things. This is not a thing that should happen to a good Jewish girl. So Chamar says, not knowing how upset they were, he says to them, my son Shechem wants to marry your daughter. Give her over as a wife. His son will make a deal. Listen, you let her marry. And, this is going to be a dual marriage. In ancient times, probably maybe it still happens, I don't know. But arranged marriages were always for the sake of some political or financial gain. They weren't just for the sake of love. They weren't because there was an actual relationship. It was more for, certain families to get together. That way it would create a more significant power or seal a peace treaty between two countries, whatever it might have been. So says Shechem, he says, listen, they love each other, so they can get married, but it'll be beneficial, financially beneficial. It'll be economical. It's going to be good for your people. It's going to be for our people. And they said we'll make a lot of business and things will go well. So Vayanu b'nei Yaakov, we're not going to go through all the details. Yaakov's sons answer, and they tell it, but they're speaking b'mirma. They're speaking a little bit, with some trickery, and they say as follows: we can't let this happen just like this. I'm sorry, it's a good proposition, but there's one detail that we have to fix. What's the detail? Is that the men of your country, of your place, don't have a bris milah, and we are Jewish people, and we only have a bris milah. So if you do this, if you give all the men in your city a bris milah, so then fine. So we'll make the deal. We'll come together. So Hamor and his father Shem, they're all into the idea, and they say, okay, no problem, we'll get the city to do so. And we know that what happens is on the third day, the when the people of the city were in pain, Shimon and Levi came in and they wiped out the entire city. Now, they killed Hamor and they killed Shem. They took their daughter back. They took Dinah back. Now, what are the parallels that we have in this story to the events of Hanukkah? So we know the story of Hanukkah took place. It was also an event that took place in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel. Okay, so just like the story of Dinah took place in Shechem, which is a city in Israel, the story of Hanukkah also took place in Yerushalayim. The battle between the Chashmonaim and the Yevanim, the Chashmonaim, and the Greeks was in Yerushalayim, where they finally were able to enter back into the Beis HaMikdash. So we know that these both happened in Eretz Yisrael. There's another parallel, is that how many soldiers did the Chashmonaim have with them on their side in order to fight against the Yevanim? Just to be historically correct, sometimes we say that the Jewish people defeated the Greeks and we won the war against the Greeks. We didn't defeat the Greeks. What we did do was we pushed off the oppression of the Greeks and moved back their oppression from our necks in order to allow us some religious freedom. That's really what we did. We won a few battles that ensured our religious freedom. There were still the local people that were in charge. There was still the governing body, so to speak. But we pushed off the Chashmonaim. We were able to push off just enough that now they could at least be free to practice Judaism. Now, we know the Rashi in Parshas Ha'azinu tells us there were a total of 12 soldiers that defeated the Greeks. The first Medrash in Bereishis Rabbah says the amount of Greeks they were teeming, just like if you ever seen a spider after when it lays a sack and it gives birth to hundreds of spiders all at once. That's what the Yevanim are compared to in the Medrash. It says there were so many of them teeming, just it was farther than the eye could possibly see. They had soldiers upon soldiers, thousands upon hundreds of thousands of soldiers. And we didn't defeat the entire army, but they threw everything they could at us, and we defended ourselves with 12 soldiers. And again, these 12 soldiers were not just, they were not trained in any military, in the art of war at all. They had no military background and military training. They had been subsisting on plants and berries that they were scrounging for themselves in the caves that they were hiding in. And these 12 people were able to wipe out or to destroy thousands and thousands of Greek soldiers. Similarly, we find that the Yevanim, that Shimon and Levi was the majority. They were the minority. There were only two people, and they wiped out the entire city of Shechem. So the same way in Hanukkah we have the Rabim biyad me'atim, the many in the hands of the few. In the story of Dinah, was also the many in the hands of the few. And again, in the same way in Hanukkah, it was the impure, the Tmeim biyad tahor, in the hands of the pure, meaning the Yevanim were defeated by the Jewish people. Here too, in Shechem, it was the Tmeim biyad tahor. It was the impure that were defeated by the pure, by Shimon and Levi. So we see a lot of different parallels that seem to occur within the events of the story of Shechem and Hamor and Dinah, and the overall story of Hanukkah. Now, the question is, however, is there possibly a perhaps more deeper meaning that we can take from this Kedushas Levi? And the answer is, of course. And let's talk about a little bit what we can learn from this Kedushas Levi. But first, we have to understand about Yaakov. We know who Yaakov is. We call him, his name is Yaakov. He's also given the name Yisrael. And we know that Yisrael is Bnei Yisrael. We are the children of Yisrael. That means we all go back to Yaakov, who's the father, so to speak, of the Jewish nation. He had 12 sons, and each of those 12 sons we know were very, very powerful, very, very unique individuals, and they each had within them certain character traits. And if you go through, let's say, the brachos that Yaakov gives his children, and the brachos that Moshe gives each shevet at the end of their lives, so we find different unique qualities that are given to each one. It says that, let's say, for Yehuda's gur aryeh. Yehuda is like a lion that's ready to pounce, and it denotes a certain amount of strength and power, but also royalty, and the kings will always come from Yehuda. Zevulun l'chof yamim yishkon. Zevulun is always by the oceans, because they're a tribe that is full of commerce. So each tribe had its own unique quality. Now the question is, what quality did Dinah possess? What quality did Dinah have that made her unique? She was also one of the children of Yaakov. Now, we don't usually think about the girls that are born to Yaakov. We know that the Shvatim, the tribes, were all born with a twin sister. Okay, but the only one that we know by name is Dinah. So although we don't normally think about the daughters that he had, there were others, but clearly Dinah is the only one that is significant enough that she is mentioned in the Torah. Right? The other names that we know that they're we can learn because it says an extra word and that teaches us you should know there were also daughters born, but none by name. The only one that we know the name of is Dinah. And that means that she has a very special place amongst the Jewish nation, and something that Dinah represents is something that gets passed down to us. So what is it? What was Dinah's unique quality? And if you take a look in the general world at large, so the general world at large, let's say for a relationship between a husband and a wife. So there's two parts when a husband and a wife bring a child into this world. There are two parts that occur. There's the male part, which he imparts his influence, so to speak, onto this child. At the very beginning, he gives over his seed, carries that child, and nurtures that child for 9 months, and really brings this child, gives child full life. Okay? Without the mother, the father's nothing. Without the father, the mother's nothing. But there are two parts that complete a whole. And the responsibility, so to speak, the goal, in a general sense of a woman in this world, is to realize that although it's the man's job to, let's say, influence and to be out there all over the place, that's his job to, maybe that's the general job for a man. The general job for a woman is to nurture and to create a certain type of atmosphere that you cannot find anywhere else in the world. Now, what kind of atmosphere does Dinah create? What kind of atmosphere do we see from Dinah? Now, we could have said, that Dinah, unfortunately, things got bad for her. She was taken by Chamar, and she was defiled. It was a terrible thing. And that almost in a sense seems to be the end of it. We don't see anything else. But we know that the Medrash brings down that Shimon was actually the one who married Dinah later on. He said, nobody wanted to marry her. I'll show you that she's a very special person. I'm going to marry her anyway. And Shimon was the one that married Dinah. And okay, questions, brothers and sisters, maybe they're half brothers and half sisters, so it's not the end of the world, whatever it might be. But the bottom line is that we see somebody in Dinah, we see somebody who left, who got let's call it defiled, but was able to come back. And she's still part of our history. She's part of the Jewish nation. So what Dinah represents is a concept that Yisrael, Afal Pi Shechatu, this is a Gemara that talks like this, is Yisrael, Afal Pi Shechatu, Yisrael, even though they have sinned, Kruyim Yisrael, they're still called Yisrael. They're still the sons of Hashem. We are still the children of Hashem, even if we've sinned. And just like Dinah, even though she became Tmeya, Kitime Dinah Achosam, she became impure, so to speak, but she was brought back. Shimon and Levi went out, they wiped out the city and said, no, Dinah can always come back. So what Dinah represents is the ability for a Jew, no matter what we've done, no matter how bad things have gotten, we always are still connected to Hashem. Now, if you take it, there's a very famous Rashi. If you look back when Yaakov met Esav, the Pasuk says that Yaakov was traveling and he had all of these things that he had to carry over what was called Ma'avar Yabok, the Yabok River. And he brings over his family and he realized that he forgot some small jugs. So he goes across, he brings those small jugs, and he's now in a wrestling match with Esav's Malach. But take a look. The Pasuk says, Yaakov got up in the middle of the night. He took his two wives, his two maidservants, and his 11 children. And he passes over Ma'avar Yabok. Binyamin has not been born yet. So we always assume 11 sons is 11 boys. Okay, but everybody wants to know, it's true there's 11 boys, but there's a 12th child. Where's child number 12? And child number 12 we know is Dinah. And Dinah seems to be missing. Why does it only say 11 children? It should say 12 children. So from here, we are taught that Yaakov put Dinah in a box and he hid her from Esav. He said, I don't want Esav to see my precious daughter. He's going to see my daughter and he's going to want to marry my daughter. And what's going to happen is that Esav is going to marry my daughter. And who knows what's going to happen to my daughter? She's going to be influenced by him, by Esav. He was not a good guy. You want your daughter to marry a good man. And Esav, he's a little bit rotten. And therefore, I don't want him to marry her. So Yaakov put her in a box, hid her from Esav. And Rashi says, because Yaakov hid Esav, I'm sorry, because Yaakov hid Dinah and put her in the box so Esav wouldn't see her. That's why all the events with Shechem and Dinah being taken transpired. Now, if we stop and think, it seems to be a fair thing. Yaakov was playing it safe. He wanted to protect his daughter, and the safest way to keep his daughter out of reach of Esav was to hide her. It wasn't against Dinah, it was to protect her. And for that, he seems to be punished. But why is it that Yaakov is punished for something that any father would do to protect his daughter? Don't want her to fall into the wrong hands. So what is it that Yaakov did wrong? Well, with this idea of understanding what Dinah represented, we can there was a mistake in Yaakov's calculation. Yaakov should have understood that Dinah's whole essence, the whole power of who she was she was able to see that even though something negative had come about, there's always a way to come back. And you can always tap into that relationship that we have to Hashem and come back. Similarly, Esav was the first, let's call it Jew, to go off the derech and not return. He went off the path and not returned. Abraham is our first Jew. He's the first one. Okay, he had a son, Yishmael, who the Torah tells us Yishmael did tshuva. He repented it towards the end. So Yishmael, okay, he was off for a little bit, but he came back, no problem. And then Yitzchak had Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov, obviously, we know he was fine. But Esav went off the path and never returned. And because he never returned, so he was stuck. But what Yaakov could have done is he could have given his daughter Dinah, who possessed this ability to say, Esav, no matter how far you have gone, no matter how far you strayed from the path of your brother, the path of your father, the path of your grandfather, Abraham, there's always a route back and you can always come back. And she would have been able to pull out of Esav that, let's call it, as we say, the Pintaliyid, that little spark of a Jew that was still inside of him, and could have turned that little spark into a burning fire that would brought Esav back. And because Yaakov robbed his brother of that opportunity, of what he could have been, that's why Yaakov was punished with all these events, to show that, you see, Dinah is going to be taken out. This is the whole essence of who she is. She's going to be sent out and she's going to be taken, she's going to be defiled, and you're still going to bring her back because that's who Dinah is. She comes back no matter what, no matter how bad it's been. Dinah always finds a way to reconnect. And therefore, that's why Yaakov was punished with putting Dinah in the box. Now we understand who Dinah is. We understand what capabilities which she possessed, and we understand how precious she was to the DNA structure of the Jewish nation. That piece of DNA that we all have, no matter what we've done wrong, there's always a route back for us. That all stems from Dinah herself. Now let's turn our attention to the Hanukkah story. And her, like this, we can see the connection that the Kedushas Levi is trying to give us between the story of Dinah and the story of Hanukkah. In the times of Hanukkah, what happened? We have a difference between Hanukkah and Purim. On Purim, there was a decree by Haman that all Jewish people, men, women, and children, should be wiped off the face of the earth. That was Haman's gain. That was Haman's goal. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to wipe everybody off the planet. And because he was unsuccessful in that, and we had a tremendous miracle that we were all saved, so we celebrate in a way that reflects the salvation of a physical survival. Physically, we would have been destroyed. So therefore, physically, we celebrate and we have a meal. There's a mitzvah to have a meal on Purim. On Hanukkah, however, it was very different. On Hanukkah, we were not under physical persecution. We were under nothing more than spiritual persecution. The Greeks had us write on horns, the horns of calf, which was supposed to remind us of the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf. And we had these horns, and we had to write on them, Ein lo chelik be'elokei Yisrael. We have no portion with Hashem. We have no connection to Hashem. Sure, we want to learn and we want to study the Torah. Sure, go ahead, study all you want. You want to become smart and learn other wisdoms? No problem. But you want to say that, oh, you're studying the Torah because you have some sort of special connection to God? No. Science, math, history, Torah, it's all the same. It's just another subject. There's no difference. And we were not under physical persecution. We were under spiritual persecution. So therefore, the mitzvahs that we have when we are saved from that situation, the mitzvahs that we have are not physical mitzvahs. Sure, it's a nice thing to eat donuts. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy every donut I eat. And there's a nice thing to eat fried items. There's concepts of eating dairy and all these things, but there's no outright mitzvah to eat on Hanukkah. mitzvahs we have are spiritual things. Lighting the menorah is a spiritual thing because it connects it to the light of the Torah. It shows us that our connection is deep and burning still, and that connection that we have to Hashem never disappears. So now we can take a look, a bit of a better understanding what the Kedushas Lev was telling us, what we see from Dina. From Dina, we understand that no matter how bad it's gone, no matter how bad a person has been, God forbid, there's always a route back. There's always a way to return. If Dina would have married Esav, you know who is the worst child or grandchild, so to speak, that Esav ever produced? The worst grandchild that Esav ever produced was Amalek. If Esav would have married Dina, there was an opportunity that Dina would have brought Esav back, and Amalek would have never been there to destroy us. Amalek would have never been there to have a Purim story. There would have been nothing, and everything would have been worked out for the better. And therefore, we learn from Dina that there's always a route back, even for somebody like Esav, it would seem. And that's the whole message of Hanukkah. No matter how bad it got, there's a reason why there were only 12 soldiers to fight against the Greeks. The reason was because the majority of the Jewish nation was totally irreligious at that time. The majority of the Jewish people at the time said, "Yeah, all right, we don't need a connection with God. We'll just live like the Greeks, and we'll be whatever we'll do whatever they do, and we'll say whatever they say, no problem." And they were willing to disconnect from Hashem and stay connected and not look at the Torah as a special connection. Rather, it's a subject just like math is, just like science is. And because of that, the miracle that we experienced, there was only 12 soldiers that could come ahead and defend in the name of Hashem, that we have nothing more than a connection to Hashem. That is all we have. The Torah is just a means to connect to Hashem, and we need to use that Torah and the mitzvahs to connect to that relationship. And they were able to bring back and say that, don't worry, Jewish nation, no matter how far you've gone, Hashem said, I'm going to perform great miracles on your behalf, because there's always a way back. So the holiday of Hanukkah, to a degree, embodies what Dina herself embodied, and shows us that no matter what has happened, there's always a way for us to return, because we have that deep connection to Hashem. So now we have a little bit of a better insight into the Kedushas Levi, what the Kedushas Levi is telling us, that the goal, the connection and the relationship between Hanukkah and the story of Dina is. And now we understand that not just that it was the same little facts of Rabin b'yad ma'atim, it was the many in the hands of the few, the Tameim b'yad tahorim. It wasn't simply the impure in the hands of the pure. It wasn't simply the Rishoim, the Rad Tzadikim, the evil ones in the hands of the righteous ones. It wasn't simply just the fact that it also took place in Israel, but rather it's a very, very deep meaning, that there's a connection, that Dina herself, what she represents, what she has imbued in the Jewish people, is that there's this piece of us that no matter how far we've strayed from Hashem, that piece of us will always be there and can be reignited and connect to Hashem, because there's a relationship that we have. Just like the Greeks, they tried to snuff out that relationship and say, you don't have a relationship with God, there's no need for a relationship, just study the Torah like every other subject. And the miracle showed us that Hashem said, no matter how much you think you've forsaken me, I'll show you that I'm still connected, I'm not letting go of you. That is the true connection between Dina, the story of Dina, and the story of Hanukkah. And perhaps we can take this lesson to see that we always have this deep, long, everlasting relationship with Hashem, and build on that for the rest of Hanukkah and as we move forward in our lives. Thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions, feel free to answer.
Yeshikok, Rabbi, thanks. One other, I'm not sure if it's quite on the theme that you developed, but I mean, one parallel also, one thing that occurs to me is sort of maybe a little bit of ambivalence towards violence. It seems like Shimon and Levi, got kind of criticized for their violent actions, and I got the sense that the rabbis of the Talmud were somewhat ambivalent about. Isn't that whole? I'm not sure if there's sort of that tension in how to observe Hanukkah, the idea of the miracle, the idea of the military victory, where that there's some tension there, I guess. So there's also might be that's a parallel that.
Yeah, it's interesting, because if you read the language that you're right. I'm sorry, I think the internet connection is a little off, so there's a little delay. I apologize for cutting you off, but but the Gemara, if you look at the exact wording of the Gemara, after the Gemara tells us the whole story of Hanukkah, it says Lishona Acheres. The next year, they instituted the holiday of Hanukkah. Now, if we would experience a miracle today, something on such a scale, then we would presume to establish a miracle right away, establish a holiday right away. Okay, last week we experienced this unbelievable miracle. We should sit down, let's discuss it. What are the guidelines? What are the commandments that we're going to ask the people to do? What are they willing to do? And then write it out, and we're good to go. Why did they wait a whole year before they instituted the holiday? So I saw an understanding is that there was a concern as to how the Jewish nation would remember the holiday. If they would look back the next year and say, oh, look how mighty the Jewish people are. 12 people, we wiped out the greatest superpower at the time, right? So then that means that we took the wrong message of the story. We're not mighty. We're not powerful. We're not strong. That's not who we are. That's not what the Jewish nation is about. And if that would have been the message, then we would not have a holiday of Hanukkah. But when they took a poll the next year, talking to people and saying, what do you remember from the holiday, from the miracles last year? And they said, oh, it was unbelievable. Hashem loves us. He was willing to perform miracles for us, even though and they realized that people understood the real reason behind the miracles. They said, now we can have a holiday for that. For such a thing, we can have a holiday. So yeah, there was a bit of a struggle as to what the holiday should be instituted for. And we didn't want to institute it specifically. Sure, there's a miracle that we won a war, but the message is not that we are mighty. The message is that we have that relationship with Hashem.
Well, this is very interesting. Here in Worcester, I belong to a conservative shul. It's very different. I'm much more affiliated with Orthodox. So I really appreciate the whole way you're talking and what you're saying. It's quite different than what we get here in Beth Israel and Worcester.
Thank you so much for coming. It's nice to meet you, Elaine.
Yeah, well, I hope to come again.
Looking forward.
And I will, as long as I get the email, and I have the time. So I really appreciate that. And I hope to come in person to some event or another.
Sounds good. We're looking forward to that.
Okay, so
Okay, right. Be well, everybody. Thank you so much. Happy Hanukkah. Happy good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi Yashikoach.
Be well. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Have a good night.
Right.
Bye.